just tuning in, I'm Dr. James Broomall, Associate Professor of History at Shepherd University, as well as the Director of the George Heather Moore Center for the Study of the Civil War. And we are positioned on one of the most probably scenic spots on the Gettysburg battlefield, a little round top off in the far distance. We can see the Emmitsburg Turnpike, Seminary Ridge, and then if it's in the shot at least, but I think obscured by that tree, is the Pennsylvania Monument. And I'm here today with my really good friend John Heckman, also known as the Tattooed Historian. And John, I just kind of want to have a coffee and a bit of a chat this morning, and talk a bit about what John does, kind of discuss some of the broader trends in the field, some of the broader controversies in the media right now, and a bit about how he connects to this, just this incredible spot. So again, for our audiences who don't know you, John, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you, Jim, for having me on the live stream. My name is John Heckman, and as Jim was saying, I have a business called the Tattooed Historian. And what I do is I mainly utilize social media to the advantage of historians. I try to digitize history in a new way, which means utilizing those social media platforms as a classroom. So I can come out here and do live stream talks such as you all have been experiencing with the George Heather Moore Center's site this week. But I also do live events and podcasting, and I utilize a lot of different apps and platforms to do that. So it's just a new way of bringing across the historical narrative, utilizing stuff that we carry around in our pocket every day.
Yeah, great. And you know, for younger audiences, you know, I think I want to really emphasize that you're doing public history. You are a public historian. You've worked obviously in archives. You've worked in a variety of different settings, but what you currently do is very much engaging public audiences and having them think critically about the historical past.
Right. I have a master's degree in public history, so I just utilized it in a different way. For myself personally, I found that I didn't fit into the traditional narrative of a historian. I didn't fit into the archive life or anything like that. So it was a way for me to try to do something to have a legacy left behind as a historian. So it was just something that I had to do also to allow other people who are like me to see that you can still do what you love and present things and be a part of the ongoing dialogue in the historical field.
Okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you here today and to talk is that you have a very unique view. I think a view from the ground, but in a very different space. And so there's been a lot of kind of talk on the web, even in newspapers, about maybe perhaps declining interest in the Civil War era, lower numbers at battlefields such as Gettysburg. And so I think you and I have some specific opinions about this. So can you give us some sense of how you are actually engaging perhaps new audiences and how you're doing so through, I think, very different formats than we might traditionally otherwise think? I mean, I think the stereotypical idea is that visitors only come to battlefields, they only come to national parks, they only come and view battle reenactments, but in fact what we now see is that audiences are engaging with the past in a whole variety of different ways, as they have been for a long time, but the format is changing.
Right. Before I forget the numbers, between 70 and 40 years old makes up 70% of my audience. I think the reason we see somewhat of a decline, but not as much as they want to tell you there's a decline, in visitation for some of these historical sites is it's economics. Some people can't afford to come. Some people are working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet now. They don't have the time to come out. But I totally disagree with the thought that there is this decline in the desire to learn our history or the desire to preserve our history. I don't see that, and the social media platforms that I utilize with those demographics just emulate that, to showcase that there's a desire out there to do more, to understand more. It's just we're so used to having that device in our pocket and in our hand that it's folly not to use it to our advantage as historians, like you're using it this week over the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Other entities are doing so. But I really don't see this decline in the desire for history or the desire to learn history. I actually see a lot of people who are between those age brackets of 17 and 40, or maybe a little bit older, who want to give back and want to understand and are really heavily involved in preservation efforts. I know a lot of my peers are heavily involved with American Battlefield Trust and other entities who are trying to preserve battlefields and historical homes and all these other areas. So I don't really see this decline going on at all, and I know that the articles that have been printed recently, I know people who were interviewed who had that same idea and that same thought, and that wasn't printed. So it was It's like, okay, that's kind of weird.
Well, and I want to highlight maybe 2 points here, and you know, is, how do you make certain, while working in this other space, to still kind of encourage audiences perhaps to see these resources that, as you and I both believe, should be preserved, should be interpreted, and should be really viewed from the ground? So maybe that's the first tension perhaps. So how do you kind of work through that?
I see it as like a baseball game.
Okay.
We're taking this live stream right now from Gettysburg here on Little Round Top. People are still going to want to come to Little Round
Okay.
Top. It's just like when I see my beloved Boston Red Sox on TV. I'm going to still want to go see them live. Okay. So it's all psychological, where a lot of people think that if we show everything, then people they don't need to come. In actuality, it's the opposite. People want to experience it for themselves. So if we just utilize these platforms and programs to introduce people to these areas, they will be out here sooner or later if they can be here geographically or economically.
Okay.
It's just an introductory course, basically, in what's going on out here in 1863 or wherever else we may be talking from.
Okay. And then the second idea is that you are actually engaging a younger demographic.
Right.
Is that correct? And so,
Oh, yeah.
Is that because of the ways in which you have used social media, you think?
I think so, but I also think that I've utilized myself authentically, and what I mean by that is I'm the same person on camera as I am off camera.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm behind a podium, I'm the same person as I am on the street, and I think we need that more in the history field than putting on this air of, I have a master's degree and therefore I have to look a certain way or act a certain way. Because I've had people come up to me and they're like, you don't act like you have a master's degree,
right.
Which I don't know what that means. What does that mean? I just act like myself.
Right.
And I think that level of authenticity really helps the brand awareness and really helps people understand that they can walk up to me anywhere and start talking to me, and I'm the same person on camera as I am off camera.
Well, and I think that speaks to this broader point where many years ago there's a study done by two historians, and what they found is that audiences don't engage with history as we might think of it, but what they do engage with every single day is the past. And so it's the idea of accessibility, right?
Right.
The audiences actually want to talk about family genealogy. They want to talk about shared heritage. They want to look at photographs. They want to engage their past and connect that to a broader narrative.
Right.
And I think, though, it's the means, the transmission. And I think by breaking down some of these walls that maybe the academy sometimes erects, you have, I think, some insights that maybe traditional academic historians don't always have.
Possibly. I think making it more personal for everyone is the key as well, because I don't understand how to move a corps around a battlefield,
Sure.
but I understand what they would have eaten, and I understand their day-to-day life when we talk about Gettysburg or something like that. So if I can understand that, I know that my audience can understand that or try to understand it better. I know there are plenty of people out there who love operational history, and that's great, and I bring people on my live streams who are really good at that, but I'm more of the personal historian. I like to have it down to the soldier or down to the factory worker or whoever. And I think that connects with a broad audience.
Yeah, and I think, at least I work in cultural history. I was trained by a political historian, but and for me, at least for the past 3 days, the most meaningful stories have been those from the ground, from the individual soldier. And I think in that microcosm, we can just understand so much about these broader worlds. And I think it gives audiences a direct entry into a world that, as you said, can be kind of very abstract and hard to understand. This is 160,000 plus men engaged over this 3-day battle. On a scale unparalleled in the Western Hemisphere. How do you wrap your mind around that? Well, maybe it's through the lens of the individual regiment, the individual story of a soldier, a citizen, a slave.
Right, and I connected to stuff like we see on TV once in a while. Like I was doing a program one time where we were talking about moving a division around, and I made it the amount of people that were sitting at a baseball game in Baltimore, and how would you move all those people out and move them down the road and do all that, because we all watch baseball or football or whatever you're into. We understand the size of a stadium, even if you go to a concert. So we understand trying to move people and trying to find things. So it's just something that we can connect with better, and I think that's one way of reaching out to a brand new audience.
Okay. And just so audiences do know, tell us specifically, I know your program as well, but tell our audiences some of the programs that you do and ways that they can find out more about what, how you are engaging these audiences and how they can engage with your work.
Well, I'm on 6 or 7 platforms and apps right now.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube. I'm just starting a branded channel. So if you go look up facebook.com/The Tattooed Historian, you will find me on there. And I usually have links to all your stuff. But what that has provided me is a way to have live stream tours like you are doing the first, second, and third here. I do free talks at the Gary Owen Irish Pub in Gettysburg, where we bring in a historian and I kind of host it alongside them. So that's free and open to the public. I have a podcast called The Tattooed Historian Show. So we're crossing a lot of different platforms and a lot of different media types to try to reach new audiences. But the most important thing is I'm the one who's posting, and I'm the one who's answering the comments and liking the comments, because I don't want someone else doing that for me, because that's my voice, basically, and that's my brand. So that makes it even more of an authentic experience to know that the person you're talking to is me. It's not an assistant or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think too what's so nice about the podcast in particular is just the sheer variety of individuals that you have on there. And again, there's a lot of people who are working in the past in all sorts of different ways, which I think is all the more meaningful.
Right, I'm trained as a military historian, war and society basically, and a public historian. So I like to have people on there having talks that I don't know anything about what they're talking about. I want to learn more. I was speaking with someone yesterday, and I told them that I'm not a person who knows a lot about a few things. I know a little about a lot of things.
Right.
So just enough to keep on a conversation or ask the next question or whatever. So that's why I like to do that. And the other key is that I love to talk to people. And I love to get to know people and why they're involved in history, or why they just like history, or why they're here at Gettysburg, etc. So that really helps bring about the authenticity of it. It's kind of like a fireside chat kind of a thing, like we're doing right now.
Right. We might have a small campfire right here.
Yeah.
We should not do a national
We're not
park,
doing
course,
that right now,
And I guess to bring it back to the specific place, I mean, you had an ancestor that fought at Gettysburg on the first day, is that correct?
Right, I had two ancestors here, one in the first day with the 150th Pennsylvania out near McPherson's farm, and then he was a musician in Company K. And then I had an ancestor who fought on Culp's Hill, actually this morning, 156 years ago this morning, with the 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade.
You were just there.
Yeah, he was there with Company F. And we just passed the 155th anniversary of him being captured at Duffield Station.
Oh, right down the street. Oh, yeah, that's
right down the street.
That spot. Okay,
yeah, we went with Travis Shaw.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he was captured last Saturday, 155 years ago, and he is currently on his way to Andersonville.
Oh my gosh.
So so he was here on the second and third day with 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe to wrap it up, can you give us one place that you would encourage audiences to visit on the Gettysburg battlefield that they maybe haven't thought of before, haven't gone to before, some place that you think is extraordinarily special or interesting, or gives you some sort of new insight into the battle?
I want you to go to Peach Orchard. Because we think about it, and I know that's kind of odd. I want you to go to Peach Orchard because I used to shoot artillery, and that's an artillery platform and an artilleryman's dream. And it's a key to what happens here on July 2nd, and it's also a key to the understanding of July 3rd. And it's just an area where you can see a lot of the battlefield, you can see a lot of the lines on Seminary Ridge, and especially on Cemetery Ridge, and you can see Cemetery Hill, and it's a real key to this end of the battlefield. But to go off of that point, one of our places, go to Culp's Hill, because not enough people go to Culp's Hill. And I think that's important because that's kind of an optional tour route, and I think it shouldn't be. I think we should cover that in mass.
Yeah, and increasingly that's figured, I think, more prominently in the type of tours that I do because it's one of those areas that just doesn't get the visitation that one might otherwise hope, and it's so critical to understand the second and the third, as you noted. But Peach Orchard, too, is one of those spots where I think you can easily drive by it and not actually engage in the space and walk around that plateau and understand the view shed from that area and how central that was between the two armies, as they fight over it on the second.
Right. Yeah. It's so very important, and I can't stress enough the importance of Culp's Hill. And someone once told me that Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill are more important than where we're sitting right now with Little Round Top. And
I could buy that.
And I hope no one is around going to hit me for saying that. But yeah, I can see why that would be.
We can't do this on Culp's Hill, of course, because it's too wooded, so they won't be able to see us. We're on this nice cleared area.
Yeah, this is a beautiful spot up here, and I can see why so many people come here in the first place.
Of course, yeah, it's a powerful spot, and the stories of the men here are just as important. But it does offer us a different view if we go from other parts of the battlefield.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate it, John. Again, John Heckman, the tattooed historian. Thank you so much for coming out this morning, having coffee, telling audiences what you do, and giving us a bit of insight into your kind of personal connection to this battlefield.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you all for tuning in to all these live streams going on around the battlefield.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll tune in about 30 minutes time for our next segment.